If you're a nurse, doctor, pharmacist, dentist, physical therapist, or any other healthcare professional licensed in Michigan, this video answers every question about the implicit bias training requirement. LARA has an entire frequently asked question document about this because it's so confusing, and I'm going to make it simple for you. Frequently asked questions we get about Michigan implicit bias is how many hours of implicit bias training do I need in Michigan? Is there a one-time thing or do I have to do it every renewal? And how does it apply to my profession specifically? I'm Joanna with Renew Now CE. We're approved by the Michigan Board of Nursing and Pharmacy. We're ANCC accredited, and we offer jointly accredited implicit bias training that covers physicians, dentists, pharmacists, nurses, and over 25 other professions. Let me walk you through exactly what LARA requires under Rule R338.7004 for the implicit bias training. First, who has to complete implicit bias training in Michigan? The answer is almost everyone. Every profession licensed or registered under the Michigan Public Health Code is required to complete implicit bias training. The only exception is veterinary medicine. That means that this applies to nurses, physicians, both MDs and DOs, pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, dentists, dental hygienists, dental assistants, physical therapists, occupational therapists, respiratory therapists, psychologists, social workers, counselors, athletic trainers, audiologists, chiropractors, optometrists, podiatrists, midwives, massage therapists, and the list goes on in Michigan. Michigan has a frequently asked question document that lists all of the professions that are required to complete implicit bias, as you note here, except for veterinary medicine. Now, the most confusing question, how many hours of implicit bias training do you need? The answer depends on whether you are a new applicant or you're renewing an existing license. For new applicants, anyone getting their initial Michigan license, you need 2 hours of implicit bias training completed within the 5 years immediately before your license is issued. For renewing licensees, here's where it gets tricky. The rule says that you need 1 hour of implicit bias training for each year of your license renewal cycle. So if you have a 2-year license, like most nurses, you need 2 hours of implicit bias training CE. If you have a 3-year license, like physicians and dentists, you need 3 hours of implicit bias CE in Michigan. For the actual law, this is the actual rule for the implicit bias training in Michigan. It breaks it down by biennial license renewals. So all of these on this list would be renewing every 2 years, so they need 2 hours of implicit bias training in Michigan. And that includes nurses, nursing home administrators, pharmacists, speech language pathologists, audiologists, and chiropractic physicians. Then for triannual, this is every 3 years, these licensees have to have 3 hours of implicit bias training. Athletic trainers, dentists, dental assistants, dental hygienists, massage therapists, medical doctors, osteopathic physicians and surgeons, podiatric physicians and surgeons, social workers, and veterinary medicine is not on the list. Physician's assistants, physician's associates, respiratory therapists, physical therapists, and midwives. An important distinction for clarification with LARA's frequently asked questions is that you don't have to take the 1 hour in that year. You could do all of your hours at once. So a nurse could take a 2-hour course and a physician could take a 3-hour course, as long as it's done within their biennium or triennium before they renew their license for the next period. Here's another important question. Is the Michigan implicit bias training a one-time requirement? No, and this is critical. Unlike human trafficking training, which you only have to do once, implicit bias training is required every time you renew your license. So if you're a nurse renewing every 2 years, you're going to need 2 hours of implicit bias. Under the frequently asked questions about implicit bias from the state of Michigan, it explicitly notes this. Unlike the human trafficking training requirement, this is not a one-time training. Implicit bias training is required every time you renew your license. Who can provide the implicit bias training? Where can you take it? What qualifies as accepted format and sponsor of implicit bias training in Michigan? This is from the frequently asked questions section. It links you to the actual rule, and in the actual rule, it explicitly defines who can offer the training. So acceptable sponsors of implicit bias training in Michigan include the following. Training offered by a nationally recognized or state recognized health-related organization. Renewal CE is a nationally recognized institution accredited by the American Nurses Credentialing Center. Training offered by or in conjugation with a state or federal agency. Training obtained by an educational program that was approved by any board created under Article 15. Renewal CE is approved by both the Michigan Board of Nursing and Pharmacy. So our 2-hour class, Implicit Bias Training CE, has been completed by 18,000 plus licensees in Michigan, and all of the licensees on the list are able to complete this class and use it to satisfy the state level requirement per the law. So this class simply by itself, Implicit Bias Training CE 2 hours, will work for every license type that is listed within the state law. Eligible professions under the Public Health Code. Anyone can use this class, $35 to complete the implicit bias training. Now, if you would like to take additional accreditation, we offer a jointly accredited course, Michigan Implicit Bias 2 hours, that offers additional accreditation, including ACCME, ACPE, and COPE. And that is jointly provided through AKH. We also offer a 3-hour option that is jointly accredited. So that is ACCME, ADA CERP, ACPE, and more. And so that will give you your additional national certification if you are seeking additional certification for your national. You do not need to do that for your state level license, but if you would like to do dual effort on completing this where it works for your state level Michigan license, but then you can also apply it to your national recertification, these two options might work best for you. Now, acceptable methods for completing the Michigan Implicit Bias Training. What works? You have to take a class that meets their licensee training guidelines, and those acceptable modalities are a teleconference or webinar that allows live synchronous interaction, a live presentation that provides for the opportunity for participants to interact with the instructor and other participants, or an asynchronous teleconference or webinar. Originally, the law was only live, but they updated it in 2023 to allow asynchronous teleconferences or webinars. Renewal CE offers an asynchronous webinar from previously recorded sessions of live implicit bias CE, and that works for the new update in 2023. So our format is an asynchronous webinar with the pre-test and post-test. That is also important from the law, that there must be a pre-test and post-test. Here's another important question. Do I have to submit my certificate to LARA for completing my Michigan Implicit Bias Training? No, you do not. At renewal, you'll simply attest, meaning you check a box confirming that you've completed your training, and LARA does not collect certificates up front. But this is important. They do conduct random audits. If you are selected for an audit, you must provide proof of completion. The rule says you need to keep your proof of completion for up to 6 years. So I would suggest as soon as you finish the course, you print your certificate and you store it in a safe place like a file folder. How many hours of implicit bias training do Michigan RNs need? Michigan registered nurses need 2 hours of implicit bias training every 2-year renewal cycle. That's 1 for each year of your license. New RN applicants also need 2 hours within 5 years before getting licensed. This is not a one-time requirement. You need implicit bias training every single renewal. You can fulfill your implicit bias training by completing Renewal CE's 2-hour course for $35. Over 18,000 licensees in Michigan have completed their implicit bias training in Michigan using this course, which is ANCC accredited and approved by the Michigan Board of Nursing. It's fully compliant with the Rule R 338.7004, provides an instant certificate, and we have a US-based customer support team with reimbursement from your employer eligible. There's a link in the description.